We're here in the northern wilds of Canada. This is British Columbia, and this is the new Audi SQ5. The simple things to make this car easy for you, it's basically an Audi S4 S5 with a crossover body plopped on top. Same 3-liter turbocharged V6 making 354 horsepower and around 369 pound-feet of torque, backed up by that ZF 8-speed, the Tiptronic gearbox. And they don't use a dual clutch here because of all the torquiness with the motor. In first gear, you would get some clunkiness. You don't have that with the 8-speed ZF. Now this is boasting Audi's Quattro Ultra, which means it can disengage that drive shaft when it's not needed and proactively think ahead and re-engage it within 200 milliseconds. But we're not driving this off-road, we're driving it on-road, and the car can send up to about 85% of the torque rearward. Now, this also has Audi's awesome Quattro Sport diff, which means 100% of that torque going backwards can go to either the left or the right wheel when needed. This road, somewhere between Victoria and Tofino, is awesome for testing that out. This also has Audi's virtual cockpit. It gets quilted, stitched leather seats as standard because it's the SQ5 and not the peasant level Q5. Just kidding, that's a great car. You've got a panoramic sunroof. It comes standard with Bassam Wasef in the passenger seat. It's got a heads-up display. It's got big 21-inch wheels. The front brakes are 6-piston front calipers. So this thing drives rather wonderfully for a crossover. I always come back to this type of vehicle, specifically the Q5 SQ5, and say that you have to think of it as a fat wagon. This is essentially a fat wagon because it drives really well, especially on this wonderful tree-lined road. The steering feel is good. You can adjust, obviously, the driving dynamics of the vehicle because this does have Audi's Drive Select. More interestingly, though, this is the first car offered like this with the adaptive air suspension. So you can change the ride height too. Not just the dampening of the suspension, but the actual ride height. And there's up to 100 millimeters of adjustability. There's a full-on lifted off-road mode. Now, sadly, you can only use that up to 12 miles an hour. It'd be cool to do something where you trick the computer and basically just go off and play in the dirt with this thing. But that's not what this is about. This is about having good on-road driving dynamics, and that it does. If you want to buy one of these, it's pretty much already at dealerships by the time you watch this video, and the base price is in the mid-50s. This one as equipped is probably a little over 60. Getting over 60 for something like this is starting to get expensive because now you're fighting against Porsche Macan type things, but this is more low-key than the Macan. Not that the Macan is flashy, but it's still a Porsche. This is a little bit more subtle, which Audi's really good at. What's not so subtle, surprisingly, the exhaust note on this is rather excellent. Audi, and I keep saying this with every new Audi I review, the exhaust note is getting better and better. Where it used to be tame and too quiet, if you grab a few gears, I'm going down quickly. Here's second gear. There's a nice burble, there's a nice pop. In automatic mode, when it downshifts, when it senses it needs to grab a lower gear, it has a really good tone to it. All right, one thing that is kind of lame about the SQ5, this. That's not an exhaust. However, the exhaust itself is down there, and it sounds really good. So that's pretty impressive. This piece though, there is a baffle in one of the exhausts, so it opens up more when it's in dynamic mode. Otherwise, it's nice and quiet around town, quiet-ish. So as good as all the changes were when we drove the S5 and S4 a couple months ago or a month ago, whatever it was, I loved the changes to those cars compared to the prior generation. It's the same thing here. The last SQ5 was pretty good, and now it's just even better. But not so subtle. Sorry, I just got taken by the view. That's really gorgeous over there.